So, besides the obvious differences between the two shows, what do you feel sets the two apart as far as mood and tempo?
Ooh, well, I don't know. I mean, it's obvious Clone Wars was vastly darker than Rebels.
Yeah.
And that was just something that, I think, given that originally we started on it, in a later time slot in Cartoon Network, and Cartoon Network type programming is a little more, I think action-oriented and intense, and it's something that Disney XD was really just getting into, and they had done a show called Tron, which was also kind of going in that vein. So it's something new that when we decided to do Rebels, we all kind of thought, I especially felt, having finished Clone Wars out, that we had gotten too intense. Star Wars exists, and I think part of what makes it great is that it's fun. One of the things that unifies it with all people is that it makes you laugh. It doesn't take itself too seriously all the time. So you get kind of intense moments with very light moments, and Clone Wars was a little bit too heavy in the end. I think we lost some viewers. We gained a lot of other viewers, older viewers. But if you look at A New Hope is really unique in its ability to kind of reach everybody. And when we started out with Rebels in the beginning, Simon Kinberg and I were talking about how we really wanted to get back to reaching everybody with Star Wars as its kind of main target. People say, who's the show for? When Rebels, and I say, well, it's from 6 to 56 or whatever you want, how old you get. If you believe in impossible things and kind of fantasy and magic, then it's for you. So that's the biggest difference to me, is the tonality. We got pretty brutal in Clone Wars, and I never would use a word like brutal, I think, to describe the old films. And so we wanted to fit a little more into that, less political things and more character-driven things in Star Wars Rebels. That's a big difference to me. I don't know if you have a thought on that.
We definitely approached a lot of more scenes with a lighter, fun tempo. Even when you have your danger and there's life and death stakes, it's a lot more swashbuckling fun. And I think that even when you harken back to more usage of John Williams' score, there's that adventure and kind of the pirate movie. So we definitely kind of draw and create the situations, and even the designs, I think, reflect that as well.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we had always tried on Clone Wars to go for this idea of moving paintings. That was one of the first things, that we talked about, was that if you can pause it on any frame and it looks like it's a painting at least as much as it is a still of CG, then we're kind of getting, we're getting somewhere. But as we went along with Clone Wars, we found that a photographic approach to shooting things was actually helping. It was more dramatic, with big areas of very dark shadow and very hot sort of highlights. It almost had that sort of Sin City, harsh rim lighting sort of thing. And it worked with the tone of the show because it was getting darker and you could sort of lose characters into big fields of black on the screen. But I think we had gone so far down that path on certain sort of arcs that made sense, for what the story was doing. But as something to turn on the TV and watch, you were looking at a largely dark screen with a few sort of dramatic shapes that were moving across it. And I think for Rebels, because it is a more sort of accessible show, we wanted to go back to the original idea of moving paintings, but moving paintings that had light, bouncing around in almost every image, which isn't to say it doesn't get dark. It's just where it gets dark, it's a little more, I guess, crafted. There's always something visible. It rarely drops all the way to deep black, even in scenes where there aren't huge amounts of light. That was one of the first things we sort of aimed for. It's always hard because we're seeing the things that are coming, and you're seeing the things that are about to air. So.
Right.
It's working pretty well.
Yeah. Let's see. What helped with kind of shedding that darkness to move on, to cleanse the palette, to move on to Rebels?
I think that Ralph McQuarrie's palette is naturally a little more lit and colorful. His paintings, in some ways, like his Tatooine, is more colorful than Tatooine in the film. Tatooine in the film kind of, especially the 70s print, washes out in a very you're really there documentary feel. Ralph kept more vibrant oranges and yellows and blues, and you see George reflected that more in like Attack of the Clones, where he crafted the frame more with all the digital media he had and digital color correction to make a more colorful Tatooine than probably I grew up with. And then he left kind of the older stuff mainly alone. So I think that was one of the main things. And then definitely the family dynamic of the cast of characters on Rebels. When I was a kid, that idea that Han, Luke, and Leia were friends, they created kind of a family with Chewie and R2 and 3PO was a big deal. And I could look around my neighborhood and kind of say, these people are like those characters, or I'm like this character. And Clone Wars was always about this group of people for 4 episodes, this for 3, this for 4. So you didn't really span a whole season with the same people. Sometimes Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka would be like the main through, but they weren't in everything. So here you're with the same characters the whole time, and I think that lets you attach more to them emotionally, and then you're invested, and then you can kind of work the story, manipulate kind of the emotions, which that all affects the tone of everything. It's not to say that like dark things aren't going to happen. Luke goes into the tree and sees his destruction. He gets his hand cut off. Harry Potter has some very dark things in it. But as long as you balance those things with good, and as long as you show how you overcome those things, then you can take your audience to those things. And there's one issue I have with some of the people always say they want things dark. But if you don't have a plan to draw people out of that and show how these people overcome it, then you just leave your audience in despair. And there was a moment making Clone Wars when we had Maul back, and he was doing some pretty terrible things. And the audience was riveted by it. We watched it at a screening, Lucasfilm with an audience. But it wasn't until Obi-Wan stood up to them and cut off Savage Opress's arm, and everyone cheered. And I was like, at that moment, I was like, oh boy, the rest of this season's really dark. And then I felt bad, because I'm like, we didn't really give them an uplift. And the thing about A New Hope is when you're driving down that trench with Luke, after his mentor's been killed, after his aunt and uncle have died, after he thinks his new friend Han Solo left him, he feels like he's all alone, and you're driving down that trench and you're hoping that he's going to be able to hit this target. And then Obi-Wan's voice comes out of nowhere, and at the time, like, people start cheering in the theater, because this is the moment. You start to get chills, and now you're believing that he's going to do it. So you're believing right with him, and then when he overcomes evil, even though we like Vader, we like stormtroopers, and we like all those things, we think they're cool, when you destroy them and you tear them down, that's the exhilarating thing that makes Star Wars work, I think, most of all. So that's what we're trying, I hope, to drive for in all things Star Wars that we're doing as we move forward. I got lengthy.
I can't follow that.
Yeah, dude, that's deep.
Go for it.